Hi! Welcome to another episode of Narcademy. We know that every substance has characteristic properties. Chemists use properties to distinguish between different substances, and the properties actually help us reveal the identity of a substance in case we don't know them. And when we compare several properties, we can use all these data to be able to determine the real identity of substances that are unknown. And then chemists also use properties to separate different substances that are mixed together. So properties are very important as we learn about chemistry. So what are the different properties of matter? There are two. Let's start with the first one. The first one is the observable property of matter or the observable properties of matter. What are these observable properties of matter? We call them the physical properties of matter. The physical properties are the ones that you can see, hear, feel, touch, smell, and measure. So, this diagram that you see on the screen will give you an idea of the different examples of the physical properties of matter. So the physical properties of matter are actually are actually those characteristics of matter that we can observe without changing the identity of the substance. So we don't change anything. Physical properties describe the substance itself rather than describing how it can change into other substances. So, what are examples of physical properties? Examples are size, texture, color, shape, mass, and volume. If you look at these examples, it describes how you sense the object, what you observe with your senses about that particular object. So, we're not changing the identity of the substance. Okay, the physical properties are also further divided into two: extensive properties and intensive properties. So, again, physical properties is further divided into two: extensive and intensive properties. So, let's distinguish between the two. Extensive properties are those properties that are dependent on how much matter is present in that substance. It's dependent on the amount of the matter that is present in the substance. What are examples of this? Length, size, volume, and mass. All these four, if you change the amount of matter, they also change. If you have more amount of matter, the length increases, the size gets bigger, the volume is expected to get bigger, and also the mass will be greater. So they change when you add or take away an amount from the object. So that is extensive property. The second is intensive properties. The intensive properties are not dependent on the amount of matter that's present. So intensive properties do not depend on how much matter is present, regardless of it. So the examples of these are color, odor, melting point, boiling point. These two are about temperature, and of course density. All of this, like color, the color of your hair won't change even if you have thick hair or thin hair. The odor of a certain natural substance has its own distinct odor that's innate to that substance, and it can never change whether you have plenty or little of it. Same thing with melting point and boiling point. Temperature doesn't change regardless of the amount. And of course, density, which is the ratio of mass and volume, the ratio between mass and volume of a specific substance, never changes regardless of how much you have. The ratio doesn't change. And that's what we call density. That's also very specific for certain type of substances. So that is all for physical properties, the first property of matter. And physical properties are further categorized as extensive and intensive properties. Let's now go to the second property of matter. Wait, this one is the summary of what I have said a while ago. So you can just look at the screen and you may take notes of this so you can summarize what I just said about the physical properties of matter. So these are examples for sulfur crystals and sulfur powder. Let's go to the second property of matter, which is the unobservable properties of matter. The unobservable properties of matter is called the chemical properties of matter. This is the property of matter that describes a substance's ability to participate in a chemical reaction. In other words, when we talk about chemical reaction, we are talking about the ability of a substance to transform into a completely different substance. Therefore, the identity of the substance changes. So the transformation is the changing of the substance from one type of substance to a different type of substance. This is where the chemical bonds that are holding the substances together will be destroyed and the new chemical bonds are formed. So, what are examples of these chemical properties? You see here toxicity, oxidation states, the combustibility or the heat of combustion of the substances, the chemical stability, we have flammability, and below you see coordination number. This is already the microscopic level, the reactivity, the possible chemical bonds that will form, and enthalpy of formation, which talks about the energy change that's taking place during a chemical change. So all of these are examples of chemical properties. Other common examples are rusting. That's a very common observable chemical change that we see around us. Rusting of metals, and then when metals also tarnish, that's an observable chemical property that we see around us. So, as a summary, let me just give you this outline for the properties of matter. So, this will guide us when we determine if it's physical or chemical properties. So, let's start with this question. Are these properties determined without changing the identity of the substance? If it's a no, without meaning it changes the identity of the substance, so automatically it is a chemical property. But if the identity doesn't change, so yes, that means it's a physical property. And the physical property, you can go to the next question. Do these properties depend on the amount of the substance? Now, if it is dependent on the amount of substance, then you can go extensive physical property, such as mass, volume, length, and the shape. If it does not depend on the amount of substance, then we call that the intensive physical property of matter: color, melting point, boiling point, and density. So are those things summarize everything that we've discussed in this video. So I hope that you've learned about the different properties of matter and you'll be able to distinguish already what are these properties, and if examples will be given to you, you can already classify the properties of matter accurately. Okay? So please don't forget to take notes and take notes of your questions on your notes so you can ask your teacher once you meet her in the classroom. This has been Madam Narca saying don't stop learning, relearning, and unlearning. Till next time, bye bye.